Hi everybody, I'm Leah, and I want to say thank you to Lee. Where's Lee? You didn't even come. But I really want to thank Lee for having this idea to do a presentation about the history of the Arlington campus, because now I know a lot about the Arlington campus as a result of the last 2 weeks. We've all been intensively researching the Arlington campus, and we've been using only resources that we have in the archives. We just decided we weren't going to use anything that we couldn't document in our collections. So we'll just see how good our collections are today, if we have any gaps or anything. Let us know. So here we are, Arlington campus, founded in 1979. It's gone through tremendous growth, as you all probably are aware of. That's why we're here today, is because of all the growth here at the campus. And Mason as a whole doesn't have a very long history. And so the Arlington campus is even less so. But Mason, just a quick overview, I'm sure you already know, but Mason was founded in 1957 as an extension branch of the University of Virginia. We were called the George Mason College of the University of Virginia. And right here on the left, this is the first building. It's the Bailey's Crossroads location. We have this house in Bailey's Crossroads, and that's where the first students went in 1957. And then we moved to the Fairfax campus in 1964, and this picture right here is from 1964. These are the first 4 original buildings. They were called North, South, East, and West buildings. Very creative, but we know them today as Finley, Krug, East, and West. And there's this parking lot. They had a lot of parking back in 1964. That's definitely changed.
Empty spaces.
And we became an independent university in 1972. We separated from the University of Virginia and went out on our own. So often people think of the Arlington campus as the law school campus, and the law school is clearly a big part of this campus, but there are a lot of other important parts, and this history of the university and of this campus, it wasn't always meant to be just about a law school. It was always meant to have other academic programs here. But the law school is a really important part, and in researching the history of the university, the history of this campus is the history of the law school, because that's basically why this campus is here today. So we're not going to get away from talking about the law school. That's definitely, we're going to talk about the law school. Okay, so 1973, the Board of Visitors felt that there was a need in Northern Virginia for a law school that served the Northern Virginia community, because there were a lot of people who wanted to go and get law degrees, but they couldn't necessarily afford the DC law schools. They couldn't or necessarily get in because the standards for admission were really high. Georgetown, American, GW, and Howard, places like those. And then they didn't necessarily want to move to Southern Virginia and relocate their whole family to go to UVA or William and Mary. So the Board of Visitors felt in 1973 that there was a definite need in the community for a law school. So they decided to draft a proposal to the Virginia General Assembly asking if Mason could have the funds to support a law school. And they didn't really know where they were going to put it. They thought probably on the Fairfax campus. So, and they also thought that this was the next logical step in the history of Mason. That's fine. So the proposal was rejected. They were like, the SHEV, the State Council for Higher Education in Virginia, and the Virginia Assembly said, you're not getting a law school. There's already 5 state-funded law schools in Virginia. We can't justify another law school. So they kind of put that on the back burner and went about doing what they were normally doing, just building the Fairfax campus and those programs. During the same time, there was a local startup for-profit law school called the International School of Law, and that was founded in 1972 by John Browder Smith and Daniel Smith, and they were 2 lawyers, and they were responding to the need that they also felt that there was a need in Northern Virginia for another law school, because they were meeting these intelligent people who were getting rejected from law schools, and so they decided to found the International School of Law. And I know personally from when I interviewed Daniel Smith as part of our oral history program, he told me that they got their first students by sort of non-traditional methods. They basically had a contact in GW, had a list of all the students who were rejected from GW Law School, and they went about writing letters to all those people saying like, hey, you were rejected from GW, why don't you come to our law school? And that's how they built their first class at the International School of Law. I don't know if that was school necessarily, but I don't want to say. But it worked, though. So they got a class. There was a huge outpouring of students who wanted to get degrees. Here's a little close-up of their admissions policy. I don't know if you can really read it. It's not very, that interesting. But their goal was to have a law school that was very much focused on the foundational principles of the law. They didn't want to do these sort of new and creative interpretations. They were very conservative, and they wanted to focus on the foundations of law, back to ancient Greek philosophy. That was sort of their goal. So they were this for-profit law school, and they couldn't get accreditation from the ABA. The ABA was not about to give them, a for-profit law school, but they weren't really making very much money either. So, so they were definitely struggling. In 1977, just to back up a little bit, in 1977 they moved to Conn's department store, which was a department store. You guys are, I'm sure, Arlington people are very familiar with Conn's. It's next door. Known as the original building, and Conn's was built in 1951. Here's the escalator. It's built. Here's a picture. This is a really rare photograph of Conn's being built. This is the only one we have, and it was in a box marked unidentified. There were 2 pictures in that box, and this was one of them. And I was like, Jordan, is this Conn's department store? And sure enough, it is. It's Conn's, being built in 1951. And just a little bit about Conn's. There were 3 levels. They had a cafe, a lounge, an escalator that we all have come to know and associate with the Arlington campus. And they also had a nurse-staffed clinic, which I thought was kind of interesting. It was at a mall. Had basically you could go and get checked out by a nurse if you were feeling ill while shopping. So the International School of Law, they moved to this location in 1977. But they were still struggling, and they were looking for a larger school to absorb them because their students were they were starting to get a little mad because they wanted they wanted a valid law degree, and so they were responding to that, and so they took their problems to Till Hazel, John T. Hazel, affectionately known as Till. He was friends with Professor Russell, who was a professor at the International School of Law, and over a very informal lunch, Russell mentioned to Till Hazel that, we're really struggling to stay afloat, and we really feel like we're letting our students down. Maybe you should talk to Mason, and they could absorb us, and we could have a home. And so Till Hazel was like, remembers back to 1973 and their failed proposal, and he's like, that's a great idea. And so he brings the idea to this guy. Does anyone know who that is?
John.
Yeah, all right. That's George Johnson, President George Johnson. And he was a really wonderful president for the university. He still is a wonderful person. So Till Hazel, who, by the way, just to back up a little bit, Till Hazel was the rector of the Board of Visitors at this time, and he served, he has a very, very long history with the university. We're going to get to him a little bit later because he's very important to the Arlington campus and to the university as a whole. And in 1963, he served on the Mason Advisory Board. This is before we had even gone on our own way. And then he was on the Board of Visitors from 72 to 83, and he was the rector from 76 to 78, and then again from 82 to 83. So he was very, very big in the Mason community, and he brought this idea to George Johnson, the idea of Mason taking over the International School of Law. George Johnson loved the idea, and so they went just like full force getting the law school and preparing proposals for the legislature. And George Johnson, for the first time, I have a couple pictures of George Johnson. Here he is on GMU today. Here he is at a budget meeting, looking very serious. So he began this massive lobbying effort, and this was the first time he had ever personally gone to the state legislature and argued on behalf of Mason. But it was definitely not the last time. It was the first in a long tradition of Johnson standing up for Mason, and but it was about bringing the law school here. And he argued that the law school made academic and fiscal sense, and that they had a responsibility to these students too. That this was the Northern Virginia community. This is their base. Mason was very much a commuter school, up until a decade ago. So this, they felt responsibility to the students at the International School of Law to bring the school here. And the ISL students, International School of Law, I'm going to just keep calling it that, they joined the fight, and because they wanted a degree that was worth something, and students from the International School of Law identified every member on the Virginia General Assembly and went directly to them in person, saying, we're real Virginians just because we live up north. We deserve real degrees. Help us, accept Mason's proposals.